Kingstown Radio, the home of classic hits, and I'm really pleased to be able to say that we're now joined by Britain's best all-round climber and most experienced climbing coach, and that's Neil Gresham. Hello, Neil.
Well, hello, but I might have to interrupt you either day. I'm not sure about Britain's best, but I can hopefully keep up with the pack.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure you're pretty good, going on your past experience and a lot of the information I've found online about you.
Oh, goodness. I dread to think. Right, go on then, hit me with it.
How did you get into climbing in the first place, then?
Well, my father took me, actually. I'm from London. He took me down to some sandstone outcrops in Kent, in Tunbridge Wells, and we just did some kind of easy top roping, and then my sort of passion for it really grew from there.
So what sort of age were you then when you first?
About 12, 13.
Okay. And you've been doing it ever since, basically?
Ever since, yeah. I mean, at the time, it seemed like a pretty unrealistic dream to ever hope to be a professional climber. There was probably only about 2 or 3 of those in the country at the time.
Yeah.
And there's still probably only about 6 or 7 of us now, so it's not exactly football.
No, not at all. But you rock climbing and ice climbing.
I do.
What are the main differences?
Well,
apart from the obvious.
Yeah, apart from the obvious. I mean, with ice climbing, you've got these kind of what look like pickaxes in your hands and these spikes on your boots called crampons, and you have to kind of smash them into the ice, and it's pretty fragile, unpredictable stuff. It's scary. It's obviously cold.
Yeah.
Your rope's only joined to these kind of ice screws, which you screw into the ice. So some would argue that the ice was a bit more dangerous, but the rock is a bit more sort of physical, more gymnastic, you know.
Okay. Do you prefer one to the other, or?
Not really. I don't know. I'd probably pick rock, to be honest with you.
Do you see yourself doing that for longer? Do you think that's the one you'll stick with?
I hope I'm climbing for as long as I'm able to put one foot in front of the other, yeah, for sure.
Brilliant. Could you explain to the listeners roughly how the grading system works? I know it's slightly
No, I couldn't explain it to a keen climber. There's no way I can explain to the listeners. Well, it depends which grading system you use. I mean, every country, to add to the complication, every country has its own grading system, but the French grades, would you believe, are commonly used at indoor climbing centres.
Right.
And they kind of go from supposedly from 1 up to 9, but like I've never even heard of 1 or 2 or 3. They'd be so easy.
Yeah.
They generally start from 4. 4 is like a beginner's climb. 5 is getting trickier. 6 is for intermediates. 7's for advanced, and then 8 onwards is for sort of elites and pros.
And I'm right in thinking you're one of the few climbers in the world that's climbed a grade E10.
Now that's using English grades,
right.
and you are right in thinking
Okay.
that. There's probably 5 people in the UK who've done an E10, I'd say.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
What are some of the hardest climbs that you've done then?
That depends on the style of climbing. There's different ways that a climb can be protected. Some of the climbs are more dangerous, some of the climbs are safer, but physically more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite hard to pick. I mean, for example, the E10 that you described is it's a climb that I did in the Peak District on the Gritstone there. It's a route called Equilibrium, and it's kind of hard by way of the fact that it's got really, really small grips, like almost like little pebbles that you're hanging onto with your fingertips.
Okay.
And I wouldn't exactly say it was safe to fall off. In fact, if you fall off the top, you'll probably land on the ground, so it's quite dangerous as well.
Okay. Yes. And of course, it's not. People might think initially that it's a sport that you might do by yourself, but I think you need a reliable, trustworthy partner.
Well, again, it depends. You can go bouldering, which is the sport of just climbing, well, as it sounds, climbing on small boulders, and you can take a little portable crash mat with you, and that can be relatively safe. But to do roped climbing, yes, of course, you do need a partner. But also, just to say, I don't want to put people off climbing too much. I mean, if you climb with a rope and you do the right type of climbing, it can be a very safe sport. I mean, as safe as playing a game of football or something.
Brilliant. Who names the routes then? You mentioned Equilibrium there. We've got Pink Panther in Switzerland, Boiling Point in Brazil, and the Orgasmatron in Salt Lake.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, the first Ascensionist names the route, and I've done a fair few new routes during my career, and one of the fun things is picking a name that usually might have something to do with a funny event on the day or some sort of significance which no one else ever understands.
It certainly looks like you have fun. I was watching a video on YouTube, other video sites are available, at Lulworth Cove, where you were actually falling into the sea.
Deep water soloing. Now, if I did have to pick one style of climbing, that for me at the moment is really floating my boat, quite literally. And it is very pure, it's very simple. You don't need any safety equipment or ropes, and yes, if you fall off, you just get wet and have another go, so that's pretty good fun.
It must be quite nerve-wracking. I mean, some people would find it difficult just to go to the top and jump in.
Yeah.
You're climbing all the way up, and
it is. I mean, I actually find it okay to jump off the top of the cliff, but to actually climb up it and fall off whilst climbing is quite nerve-wracking, especially if the cliff is overhanging, because you're worried that you're going to land awkwardly. So you do have to practice falling in and landing correctly.
Yeah.
You know, it's another specialist form of climbing, really.
You've travelled quite a lot doing climbing. Do you think that's
Yeah.
part of the attraction, the travel?
Probably the main attraction now. I think that for the first sort of 10 years of my climbing career, you just want to go to the places that are on the world climbing map, that have got established climbs. But for the last 10 years, the attraction has been to actually seek out countries that aren't famous for climbing and in fact may have no climbing at all, and just take a bit of a gamble, see what we might find. And I think that's why probably the most rewarding trips have been to obscure places like, you know, Brazil, Vietnam, Mongolia, Cuba, China, you know, because it's a great cultural experience. You love the travel, but then if you climb as well, it's brilliant.
Excellent. Next question is actually from Rob, the cameraman, if you're watching on the web.
All right, then, Rob, go on.
He'd like to know what other sports you're involved in and how have you found that these complement sort of the way you climb, or developing your climbing style?
I'm not one of these people who came to climbing from sort of gymnastics or martial arts or even ballet, which are the activities that are said to assist climbing.
Okay.
I never really did any other sports. I was pretty rubbish at school sport. So I don't really do any sports that help my climbing. I mean, the only other thing I do is a bit of snowboarding in the winter, which I quite enjoy.
Yeah. You did mention earlier not putting people off, you know, talking about how you've got something like that. What's a good way for people to get into it if they're interested in rock climbing?
Well, the best way is through the indoor walls, and places like the Rock City here in Hull is fantastic. You can come and learn in a completely safe, controlled environment. It's no different to doing a typical sport at a sports centre. You know, everything is super, super safe, and you know, if you don't have the equipment, you can hire it. If you don't have the skills, you can be taught them, and it's not as expensive as you might think.
I've only been climbing for about a year, mostly here at Rock City in Hull. And I certainly know when I'm doing the climbs with the ropes, I feel safe and I'll take that risk, if you like, because you know you're safe. Whereas with the bouldering, I'm still a bit more edgy.
Yeah, the bouldering, because you're thinking about how you're going to land,
Yeah.
and people do occasionally sort of sprain an ankle or something. So yeah, the roped climbing is actually, I would say, safer than the bouldering.
Okay. So something you're involved in now is climbing coaching holidays, is that right?
Not anymore,
No?
actually. No, I've just stopped doing this. But but you are right, I do a lot of coaching, mainly at indoor walls now. Partly because when I go outside onto the rock, I want to sort of rather maybe selfishly climb for myself.
That's
so I'm not running the coaching holidays anymore, but I'm doing indoor stuff.
And what about the rock walls within gyms? Are you involved with
A little bit, yeah. The rock fit stuff.
Yeah.
That's a little project that we're running down south. Yeah, that's going quite well.
Have you had any injuries then?
Lots of sort of sports type injuries like tendons and finger tendons, elbow tendons, classic climbers injuries. I've only had a more severe injury once, but I'm sure you don't want to hear about that.
Go on then.
No, this is rather morbid. I fell off and hit my head and knocked myself out.
Oh dear.
But I think I'm alright with it. Maybe I'm all the man for it.
Do your friends agree that you're fully recovered?
No, I don't think any of them do. They probably all think I'm barking mad.
You also write for climbing magazines?
Yeah, Climber in the UK and Rock and Ice in the States. I'm the training columnist for those magazines.
Okay, brilliant. And what's in the pipeline for 2012 then?
Well, next month I'm going to Austria, ice climbing. Looking forward to that.
Excellent.
And there's another deep water solo project that I want to finish in Pembroke in Wales.
Brilliant.
So I'm in training for those.
Excellent. We were watching a DVD the other night of some ice climbers, Audrey and Innes. Have you heard of them?
Yeah. I mean, Innes is certainly Innes Papper is a legend. Yeah, Austrian. In fact, we're staying in her house in Austria next month.
Excellent.
It's a small world.
It is indeed. Yeah. Well, I think that's about it, Neil. What can people do if they want to find out more about you? Have you got a website?
My personal website is neilgresham.com, but if you're interested in doing some coaching sessions with me, then it's climbingmasterclass.com.
Fantastic. And I should have forewarned you really. Do you want to choose a piece of music that we can play next?
Wow, you put me on the spot. No, I might have to throw that one back over to you.
Fair enough. All right, Neil, big thank you for joining us for Kingstown Radio. Thanks very much indeed.
Cheers, thanks very much. Thank you.